Here we are with the Mirage booster, and there's some interesting cards here, but most of them aren't on the power level we are used to. We get a 3/2 flyer for 3, but it has phasing, so you can only use it every second turn, and that's actually quite an efficient creature. Slightly better hill giant with a small downside. I really like Power Sink just as a general answer to cards in this format, even though blue isn't the greatest, or so I've heard. I think I'm just going to take it here and see what we get. We have Tender Griffin, 2/2 flyer for 4, but that competes with a Pacifism, which is certainly one of the better cards, one of the better removal spells in the format. It is kind of dangerous to go blue-white because there is a lot of creatures with activated abilities, and you might be left without a solution to them. But we don't necessarily have to draft blue-white. Now, Ray of Command is actually pretty insane because you can just have a threaten effect at instant speed, so you can usually trade off 2 opposing attacking creatures. So we probably don't even have the necessity to move into white here, and I don't see any other card that's really worth taking. I like Korean Elves quite a bit, but Ray of Command following up our blue card should be a very good choice. The white cards keep coming as well, but don't know if a triple white card is what we want now. And these, well, Illumination is not a limited card we are interested in. Another Griffin, 2/2 flying first strike for 4. That's almost good in today's standards, so it's going to be quite nice in this format. Now, I'm looking at creatures to pick up because blue is going to have quite a weak creature suit, and the Griffin seems like the pick to me. There's Urborg Panther, but that's basically only a 3-mana 2/2, so I'm going to take the Griffin here. I don't know how good Teferi's Drake is, but it seems like only having the opportunity to use him every second turn is just not what you want to do. Next up we have Psychic Transfer. That is a funny card, but also not interesting and limited. Now, in our colors so far, we have an aura that acts as a combat trick and a 1/4 for 3. So this is the white version of Horned Turtle, which doesn't necessarily have to be bad, because if most creatures are 2/2 flanking or 3 power, then having a 1/4 might actually be what we want. Now, Grave Servitude is basically a way to get rid of 1 toughness creatures, but I don't value it very highly. I think I'm actually going with the Scouts here, just to get another playable card and stay more or less open regardless. Bad River is a bad fetchland for islands or swamps. Nothing to see there. We have a very weird combat trick that only untaps a non-attacking creature, so you can basically only play it on defense, and I like my cards to do more than that, to be honest. Now, this looks like an interesting card. 3-mana 2/2 that cantrips if you have the mana available when it dies. That's already more than you can expect from the most 3-drops in this format, I suppose. And it would be nice to continue picking up blue cards. I guess that the next best card is probably Stalking Tiger, maybe Rampant Growth, but this here looks like a good addition. And it also seems like blue-white is, while maybe not the best color combination, is certainly open. This pack looks like people are drafting red-green. Draw a ride. Okay, that isn't the greatest card. Memory Lapse, one of my all-time favorites. I think it's one of the more powerful counter spells available in Magic overall, in fact. if your deck is set up to make use of it. So it should probably be a little more tempo oriented than our deck is looking, but it's still a powerful card, so nothing to complain there. I think it's much better to go with Memory Lapse than picking up a black card here. We aren't looking to be in black and picking some kind of shade or something. Just doesn't seem right. This is one of the guild mages, and that one has reasonable abilities, but the black one just shoots creatures for 1 while damaging its controller. I think it was also reprinted in Time Spiral, so you might know it. Shadow Guild Mage. And that's actually difficult to handle if you have a deck with a lot of 1 toughness creatures. So this would be an aura, but I'm tending towards this Serpent, which is just a 4/3 for 4. And if our opponent is playing islands, it's great. Otherwise, we can sacrifice our islands to give him some for a turn. Not the most efficient card, but a 4/3 defender for 4 is already reasonable, and it might just be able to attack. I'm going to play another Seer. I'm not sure if I misevaluate this card, but it looks really reasonable. This is actually a nice cantrip, blocking an unblocked creature basically, which could be quite nice. It does draw a card at some point, so I think the white card here is probably better than taking some card of another color. What does this do exactly? We tap a creature of our own, and then it deals damage to target attacking or blocking creature with flying. Okay, that's a very expensive effect for something that has to be right. I'm just going to take this white instant. It does do some stuff, although it's probably worse than healing self most of the time. Next up, we still have the artifact or enchantment counter spell that also gives its controller life, so that's not something I'm interested in. Divine Offering sounds much more reasonable, but I also like these auras that you can play as an instant. I think that's probably more necessary than an artifact removal spell. Who knows? Wow, black cards and a red card. I really don't mind my opponents having a 5/2 defender, and both Grave Servitude and Painful Memories sound like they could be the most dangerous to me. Grave Servitude is just the better card overall, so let's take that. And this is a Circle of Protection. We probably won't play. Okay, 5 creatures overall, most of them very underwhelming. So let's hope to get some more flyers, which would be the best way to go about things. We do have a Cloud Elemental here, and I really like that as a card in general, and I think it's just what we need in our deck. The alternative would be this Rise from the Grave effect that also adds a counter, and all the rest looks really worse. And Cloud Elemental is, as I said, a nice way to just drop a flyer and start to deal some damage. So I think that should be a good choice there. Now another rare that is really weird, but not for us. So a first strike reach creature for 2 white is very efficient. Well, it's just great value overall, quite obviously. Knight of Valor is one of the many 2/2 flanking creatures that's almost impossible to block. And then there is Knight of the Mist, which is kind of funny because you have to pay an additional blue, and if you don't, then it destroys a knight. So it's actually insanely good against knights, but otherwise it's a 4-mana 2/2 with flanking. So maybe this tables, maybe one of the 3-drop flanking knights tables, and I can just pick the archer here, which is better for the curve, and should do a very good job on offense, on defense, against flyers and everything else. Next up, Suleiman's Legacy doesn't sound like a card that's considered limited playable. There's another flyer that also has phasing, but it does phase out other creatures when it phases in. So you can actually make use of the effect to some extent. The question is if something like Infantry Veteran or Inspiration is better than having these Ifrit. I actually kind of like this effect. I want to try out some phasing cards, and having a creature that acts as a pseudo removal spell could be kind of nice. Or let me think about this. What happens if I phase out? If I phase in at the beginning of my turn and phase out another creature, then it's going to come back, right? That doesn't sound so good anymore. I'm just going to go for the card draw. I'm not so sure if my rules knowledge of phasing is correct, but we'll see. Creatures don't untap. Okay. Not something I'm interested in. Another 2/2 flanking creature for 3 that has the ability to phase out, which isn't very good if damage doesn't stack, so not that interesting. I think we're just going to pick a 3/1 creature with a nice offensive ability here, and the rest just seems worse. You can't have too many 3-drops, right? So Relic Ward is another one of these cards you can play at instant speed, but it gives an artifact shroud, so yeah, let's call it narrow. This looks much nicer. It prevents 5 damage that you can divide as you choose, so it's almost like a safe passage in certain ways. Now, Vision Charm is not interesting because it doesn't cantrip or does anything else. We have a nice collection of charms here, and yeah, I think Remedy just the best choice. Maybe as a sideboard card against some of the red burn spells, but we can easily play one of these main deck. I'm really desperate for some more creatures that could actually win a game, so I think a 2/2 flyer that destroys a black creature is much more important than another inspiration. So let's take that. And let's see what we have. We hide this and this. We can actually hide quite a lot of stuff. All of these aren't interesting, really. And this isn't a card you want to main deck either. So if we just play all of our 9 creatures, then the deck looks like this currently, which is a nice start, but we still need quite a lot of cards to make this a deck. This is another one of these enchantments. Creatures you control get +0/+1, and you can play it at instant speed. But I'm going to take the Knight of the Mist. Maybe we can kill some knights of our opponent, then it's going to be really good. Otherwise, we are always going to have to pay the second blue, but that's fine. Now, I heard that this is sometimes used as a legacy sideboard card for blue decks, or well, maybe also other decks, I don't know, to get rid of Knight of the Reliquary, for example, which is kind of a funny interaction, giving blue a removal spell for the green-white knight. Now, all of these don't seem very interesting. This is an anti-flyer rare, so I might just take it to not have to play against it. And that a combo trick that only gives first strike is probably too weak. Yeah, I don't like it that much. Another card that's really good against flyers is Wind Shear, so we might have to take that out as well. Shrieking Drake is reprinted as a 2/1 in Return to Ravnica, so as a 1/1 it's actually just not that great. So, and we don't really have effects that profit from taking our creatures back to our hand. So I'm just going to take out the Winch here as well. It's probably not necessary to hate draft these cards, but also doesn't cost me too much. And there's another Knight of the Mist. I'm really interested in trying to just main deck all of these and try to play against an opponent with a lot of knights. That has to be good, right? Of course it's going to be awful if it's our only 3-drop and we can't do anything. Looks like Infantry Veteran tabled, which is not something I'd expect, but I'm happy to pick up this 1-drop. If you've played, was it M11, I believe? This looks like it doesn't do much, but it's actually quite powerful. Here I'm going to take the enchantment that pumps up my creatures. If we happen to play against the aforementioned Shadow Guild Mages, it's perfectly fine to just drop this turn 2, making all of our creatures just so much better. I even get a second one, but I'm going to hide it for now, it's just not that interesting. We have 16 cards, so we picked up 8 playables in each pack, and that basically means that we are on course. If we continue this, we are going to end up with 23, 24 playables. Much less than you'd usually have in the more current formats, but that's part of the experience. So I see a Phantom Warrior where that should be pretty good, better than a 1/3 banding creature or anything else in our colors. Let's check out the rare. Looks really nice. Basically a 9/9 for 6, but it's going to grow smaller pretty quickly. Next up, we have quite a lot of cards for us. I don't think that Psychic Vortex is what you want to do in Limited, although it looks like a lot of fun. Now, Banana Knight is certainly good, just as a flash first strike knight for 3. Alternatively, we could look at Merfolk Traders, basically a one-shot looter effect that could come down on turn 3, making our curve look a little nicer. And there's also Manta Ray, a 3/3 for 3 in blue, which is basically unheard of, but it can't attack unless the opponent controls islands. So as much as I like the Banana Knight, I think that Merfolk Traders could actually add more to our deck, considering our curve. So I'm going to go with the 2-drop here. Next we have to read some cards. Expensive regeneration spell, something with phasing. Another Griffin. All these Griffins are 4-mana 2/2s, it seems. And wow, when it dies, it returns the top creature card of my graveyard to the battlefield. Okay, that could be pretty awful, but could also be quite nice. I like that. Let's just go with that. And next up we have an 8-mana statue that becomes a 5/5. Becomes an 8/8 for 5 mana. So you invest 13 mana before it does anything. Probably not that interesting. I really like Disrupt. Even if the opponent can can pay the mana, you still get to draw a card. So alternative would be to pick a 3/2 for 3 with a slight disadvantage. I think we don't really need another 3-drop. Let's just go with Disrupt and the possibility to really get some people with it. This looks like a pack that doesn't have much for us. Sage All, I guess, is kind of playable. You get a 1/1 flyer in a set that just has weaker creatures overall, and you get to manage your fate a little bit. Let's just see if it makes the cut in the end. If this is what we get 5th pick, then it might certainly be possible that we need to play it. Currently our mana is a bit awkward. We have more blue cards, but also longbow archers, so in general you want 10 sources for a 2-color 2-drop, or, well, 2 colored mana 2-drop, but this looks more like we're going to go with a 9-8 split in favor of blue. Next up, we have the question if we want to go for any kind of phasing creatures again, which I'm not the greatest fan of. I also don't want to pick the Manta Rays. We already have one creature that can't attack if our opponent isn't blue, so that's not that interesting. I think it comes down to if a second Sage Owl or the first Duskrider Falcon is more interesting for us, and I know for a fact that the Duskrider Falcon is going to be good against black, whereas the second Sage Owl doesn't have to be good at all, so I think I want that. Maybe only as a sideboard card, but that's fine. Next up we have Jangling Automaton again, which is certainly a nice 3-drop. There's nothing wrong with untapping the creatures our opponent controls. It's only bad if he attacks us with like a 4/4 and then we want to attack back. But then we are probably forced to block it anyway, so it's not really a big deal. I might like Guided Strike a bit better even, because we do have quite a lot of creatures now, and that's one of the few combat tricks which also draws you a card. So I'm going to go with the strike here. Giving +1/+0 in first strike, drawing a card is perfectly reasonable. Next up we have Master of Arms. Gerard, I guess. Tap target creature blocking Master of Arms. I don't know if the rules work differently last time, but that doesn't seem like a very useful ability. So maybe Apathy or Merfolk Traders are the better choice. This, okay, it's an interesting Thirst mechanic card, but I don't want my opponent to be able to untap his creatures again. So I'm going to go with the second Merfolk Traders. Looting should be fine, and if you draw this later, you're just going to use it for the enters the battlefield effect. And this looks like a playable card as well, giving a creature flying, but has a secondary use of bouncing it. Okay, that late of a Manta Ray we can pick up, and hopefully we won't have to play any of the next cards. Probably just main decking this. It's great against blue, and otherwise it's a 3/3 defender for 3. Yeah, I don't think we will play any of the other cards. Okay, we can start thinking about our deck. 27 cards, so we only have to cut 4, and we already see stuff like Sage Doll, Duskrider Falcon, Phantom Wings, and Elms is just not going to cut it, most likely. Maybe the Phantom Wings, but I don't think so. So that would already be giving us a 23 card deck. That doesn't necessarily need 17 lands, but we have multiple ways to get rid of excess land, so I think that should be fine. Maybe we actually want to have Relearn available, but probably not. So let's see what we have here. Oh, we also have Remedy. I think we hit these before, but could be a nice option as well. And I want to try to play as much creatures as possible. Should only be giving us a good effect. And our spells aren't the most powerful, to be honest, so let's see. This is 25 cards. We can still cut quite a lot of stuff. Probably around 2 cards. And one option would be to lessen the amount of cards that rely on islands, to have More cards that always do something, but these are also quite good if your opponent is beating you down on the ground. So if he's beating you down on the ground, we have very good blockers. If he's beating us down in the air, it's very likely that he's blue. So these should actually be quite good. I'm not very sure how good Disrupt is. It has great potential, but it could also just do nothing, and it certainly is only a cycler in the later stages of the game. I could see myself just going with a 16 land build, given that we have two Merfolk Traders, a Disrupt, a Guided Strike, an Inspiration. That's quite a lot of cards that draw us additional cards and additional lands as a result. So maybe only cutting one of these is actually the way to go. And somehow I think that having Parapet would give us more because of the flexibility of just dropping it on turn 2 or flashing it in for a minor effect, but one that's actually quite comparable to Remedy. So I think I like that better. Now the question is if Parapet is actually worse than the additional land we could play instead. Making all of our weak creatures have one more toughness sounds really awesome. So I think I like to have one of them in the deck. And then we'll reevaluate after the first round. Now, it should be reasonable to play 16 lands, even though we necessarily need to hit our third land. After that, we don't get anything out of lands 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. So 16 should be enough. And we do have the Longbow Archer, so only playing 7 white sources makes him a bit weaker. But we have a lot of blue cards and also one that wants us to sacrifice islands. So the islands are certainly more important. Given that we also have 2 Merfolk Traders that help us find planes, I think that we don't really want the even split, but the 9-7 split instead. 7 planes, not enough to cast this guy reliably on turn 2, but that's the price you pay in a 2-color deck with this high of a mana requirements. So I think this should work out fine. Let's see how it goes.